Bhagavad Gita had influenced and is still influencing many world leaders. Steve Jobs was highly impressed with the book and he referred to it all the time. He considered the Bhagavad Gita as a prized possession and referred to it time to time. Chapter 14 is of particular importance as it defines the three gunas, Satgun, Rajogun, and Tamagun, which influence our actions. Shlok-wise division of the chapter 14 is as follows. Shlok 1 to 4, evolution of the world from Prakriti and Purush and the glory of knowledge. Shlok 5 to 18, the qualities of Sattva, Rajas, Tamas described. Their indication and symptoms are also explained. Shlok 19 to 27, means of God realization and the marks of the soul who has transcended the three gunas. Questions that people ask about chapter 14 of the Bhagavad Gita, which is also known as Gunatraya Vibhag Yoga. What is the message of chapter 14 of the Bhagavad Gita? The answer is three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. They keep the body bound within themselves. The individual is ruled by them. One is ruled by the suppression of the other two. Likewise, Satgun has the power to lift individual to enlightenment. Another question. Life lessons from the Bhagavad Gita. There are many. 1. Concentrate on your duty. 2. Do not be afraid. 3. Anger makes one lose mind. 4. Do not doubt, have faith. 5. Always keep control, remain calm. 6. Control your desires. 7. Do not run away from your responsibilities. 8. You come empty-handed, and so shall you go. 9. Anger and greed are destructive and your enemies. 10. Accept whatever happens to you as the will of the God, because there is nothing on these circumstances, but you can definitely change your attitude. You can definitely respond in a proper fashion. The chapter comprises 27 shloks, and now I'll read English translation from shlok number 1. The Lord Almighty said, "Now I shall explain to you the prime wisdom of knowledge that has enabled the sages to attain Param Siddhi. The people who acquire the wisdom and assimilate the same realize me. They are not subjected to the cycle of rebirth, and they do not get nervous even on the doomsday. Arjun, nature is my creation and is known as Brahman, form. Nature is the mother of all living beings, and I am the father responsible for their birth. My union with nature brings about the birth of all living beings. Arjun, all life appears to be born of innumerable mothers from their womb, but in fact, they are my creation. Nature is the mother, and I alone, the father of all life, all living beings. Arjun, Satgun, Rajogun, and Tamagun, these three modes of attributes of nature keep the eternal Atman bound in the mortal body. Nishpap Arjun, among these three gunas, Satgun being pure enlightens and is without any defect. Satgun breeds joy and wisdom and is associated accordingly. However, Rajogun is born out of desire and attachment. Rajogun binds the Atman with actions and the results thereof. But Arjun, Tamogun, which degrades a human being, is born out of ignorance. Tamogun binds the soul with lethargy and tendency to carry out pointless jobs. Arjun, Sattvagun brings peace and joy. Rajogun is responsible for karma or action, and Tamogun eliminates wisdom and engages the mind in futile tasks. Satgun spreads by overpowering or curbing Rajogun and Tamogun. Rajogun grows by suppressing Satgun and Tamogun, and likewise Tamogun spreads by suppressing Rajogun and Satgun. When Satgun grows by suppressing the other two, that is Rajogun and Tamogun, it brings great understanding, consciousness and reasoning. It is indicative of growth of knowledge and wisdom. And Arjun, the growth of Rajogun is indicated by greed, selfish thoughts and taking actions with personal ends in view. Rajogun is also towards promotion of growth of desire and hankering after worldly pleasures. But when Tamogun spreads, one finds growth of darkness in the senses and the mind, and the lack of desire to do one's duty or anything. One is down with procrastination, useless efforts, lethargy, and excessive sleep. Such debasing factors increase and develop. If a person dies when Satgun is on the rise, he achieves superior abodes with purity and goodness prevails. Here he enjoys heavenly pleasures. And if a person breathes his last when Rajogun is prevailing, he takes birth among the people who are more attached to action, like in this human world. If one dies when Tamogun is on the rise, the person is condemned to lowly and ignorant life of worms, animals, etc. The result of sattvic action is joy, wisdom and non-attachment. The result of rajas action is sorrow, and that of tamas action is degradation. Satgun breeds wisdom, Rajogun undoubtedly breeds greed, and Tamogun breeds futile action or the lack of action and degradation. The persons who remain in the fold of Satgun attain better worlds like heaven. Those remaining in Rajogun remain in the human world, and those practicing lethargy, excessive sleep and futile actions representing Tamogun are condemned to the lowly life of worms, animals and the like, and they reach hell. The moment is a human being's important if he does not recognize himself as the doer of action, but believes that any action is born out of introduction of gunas. Further, once he realizes that Lord Almighty beyond the bonds of these gunas, he achieves my status. Such a person transcends the effect of these gunas and becomes free from the perils of birth, death and old age. He attains salvation. Arjuna asked, what should a man do to transcend and rise above the effects of these gunas, and what should be his qualities of his actions. The Lord Almighty said, Arjun, the person who neither grudges nor desires the natural results of these gunas and remains as a witness without getting involved or affected is bound to maintain his calm countenance and is never disturbed. Such a person understands the actions are the result of interaction of these three gunas. He is thus in a position to maintain the stability of his mind, and he understands the presence of the Almighty in all places at all time. He has no reason to feel sad or get bewildered over anything. The person who is constantly satisfied and realizes the presence of the Almighty Soul above all, he treats joy, sorrow alike. For him, dust, stone, or even gold do not make any difference. He remains steadfast, whether he is appreciated or criticized, whether he is loved or hated. Such a person behaves uniformly with his friend and with his enemy. He who has no ego of himself, being the doer of any action, is considered gunatit, transcending the effects of the actions. And the person who remembers me with all understanding that I, the Lord Almighty alone, is the be-all and end-all of everything, he considers me as worthy of absolute devotion, because I am the abode of the eternal peace. I am the pure nectar. He carries out his duty to the best of his ability. He achieves ultimate happiness that results from the stability of mind and controlling all desires. The underlying thought regarding life that establishes itself is that the soul of an individual is neither born nor does it ever die. It emanates from the eternal Almighty, goes through various cycles, and through good deeds returns to its origin. It becomes one with the everlasting, omnipresent Lord, the Almighty. Since we come to this world but for a temporary period, we should harbor no worldly attachments. The world as we see, as we feel, and as we experience, including all its worldly objects, is one great Maya. It's an illusion. This is the creation of God. This is the creation of Lord the Almighty. There is therefore no place for personal ego. Nothing really belongs to anyone. All objects are different manifestations of the vast cosmic energy which keeps changing form and position. What is seemingly yours today once belonged to somebody else and will soon be transferred to another. Realizing fully well the illusory nature of the world and one's own transient existence, one should practice detachment. This means that you remain in the present. You take routine actions, carry out all your duties towards your family, community, or state. However, you do not get emotionally attached or involved in anything, any person, any object, any position. This is the only path to salvation. This is indeed the best way to live life in its full significance. The contentment experienced by a person who practices the principle of detachment is far greater than the one experienced by a person who gets involved in trivial, momentary pleasures and keeps on harboring wild thoughts. The prime subject of the Bhagavad Gita emphasizes the need for all human beings to perform their duty. It becomes explicit that the greatest happiness one can find is experienced through the successful performance of duty. Action has been considered as that which no mortal can ever or should ever avoid. Those who, out of laziness or sheer habitual procrastination, get into the vicious cycle of physical inaction are the worst sufferers. They get into tamogun. They may not be physically carrying out any work, but their mind continues to do so. The mind, when a person is awake, cannot be idle. It doesn't remain idle even when we sleep, albeit we may not be aware of the mind's action during that state, but it keeps on thinking, working on one matter or the other, and there are dreams. They have not been understood, but they definitely represent some of our desires, some of the things that we have experienced, good or bad. The more you shirk your work and remain idle, the more the mind gets restive. This heightened activity does not bring any benefit and only adds to the confusion of the mind and inertia of the body. Such a person's mind tends to breed various negative emotions: fear, jealousy, greed. The list goes on. Undoubtedly, these base emotions bring misery and sufferance to their bearer. It is only successful performance of your duty that brings you real happiness. The duty may vary from significant, extremely important mission to simple, mundane, unenviable tasks. All duties must be performed with the same diligence. Thus, whilst a ruler or an administrator must carry out his assigned duty to the best of his ability, the menial worker must put in his very best into the work, whatever he does. The dialogue between Arjun and Lord Krishna is ostensibly all about the necessity of the battle, but also we consider it is necessary of performing one's duty. However, while explaining the importance of this battle, Lord Krishna goes on to expound the principles that classify all human desires, emotions, and actions.